Hey everyone, welcome to my top 10 SNES hidden gems. I've picked out 10 really interesting games from my own personal collection. Of course, there's hundreds of other SNES games out there that are worth playing, so let me know down in the comments below what other games you consider to be hidden gems on the system. And with that said, let's get started and let's take a look at game number 10. Here we go. In at number 10 is a game called Equinox. This was actually made by the same people that made Plock, which I showed off in my top 15 SNES games video a few weeks ago. And this is actually a very different game, but it shares a few things in common. The music and the graphics are both absolutely incredible in this game, and it's also one of the only isometric games that I actually think controls really well too. Basically, you have an overhead world map that uses Mode 7 rotation style graphics, which looks incredible in its own right, and then you go down below the surface into these huge sprawling dungeons where you have to collect orbs in order to fight a boss and then move on to the next world. It flows really well. All of the dungeons are really well designed. There's a variety of different items, different power-ups, and a load of different enemy types too. If you're watching this video now, you'll see just how good the graphics are. They really do look incredible for the system, and it's definitely a really underrated game. I don't hear anyone talking about this one. So if you've got a SNES, if you want a Zelda-style game in a way, but also something incredibly unique, definitely check out Equinox. This one is an incredibly cool mech game with some really punchy gameplay. You can really feel the impact in this game. This is called Cybernator, and when I actually had the SNES growing up, this was a game that I always wanted, and I actually found this in one of my favourite game shops at the time, which was Game Zone in Shrewsbury. For some weird reason, I actually found this under one of the shelves, so I was kind of crawling across the floor, and I dug this out and bought it off the guy at the counter. I don't even think he knew it was in stock. And I got home one day after college and I played this game, and I was just blown away by how cool it is. As you can see from the video playing over this, it's kind of a slow game, but it really gives a good feeling of impact with the character. It's got a range of really cool weapons, it's got really good controls. I like the fact that you can angle your gun at any angle to take out the enemies. It's got really cool boss fights and really great level design too. So if you want a really cool mech style action game, highly recommend Cybernator. Now for a shooting game, and I kind of mentioned this one in an earlier video as well. This is Super Aleste. Definitely the most impressive shoot 'em up on the SNES. When you think of the SNES, you usually think of slower paced games compared to the Mega Drive or the TurboGrafx, but this game really shows what the SNES can do if it's in the right hands, and it's such a good game. Again, like a lot of these games, I absolutely love the soundtrack too. It also has, of course, Compile's very famous power-up system, which basically means, from my point of view, you collect the laser power-up and then you just try and keep that throughout the entire game at all costs. It's such a fun game. It's got some amazing graphics, loads of Mode 7 effects, which of course the SNES is really famous for. Another shoot 'em up that's worth checking out if you want something really impressive for the system is Axlay as well. But I did only pick one, and I do think that Super Aleste just beats out Axlay in the fun department for me personally. But they're both absolutely incredible games, and there's no reason why you shouldn't play both of these. Now for a kind of simple game, but I really enjoy what they did with this. This is Arcanoid Do It Again, and yeah, it's a really weird title, but the game is just really fun. Of course, Arcanoid is a kind of Breakout clone with different power-ups, but this one also includes boss fights, as well as some really nice graphics and a load of different environments for you to play in. It's a very simple arcade-style game, but if you do enjoy that sort of game where you can just switch your mind off and just play this mindlessly, then there's a lot to enjoy here. I do really enjoy the Arcanoid games, and this is probably the best of the bunch. So if you want something very simple but very fun, and also a game that's kind of overlooked, because once again I don't really hear anyone talking about this one, definitely check out this Arcanoid Do It Again. Now, I wasn't really sure whether this classes as a hidden gem or not, but I honestly think that it's one of the best puzzle games that Nintendo's ever made. This is Warios Woods, and obviously it's a first-party Nintendo character, so you can kind of argue whether this one should be included or not, but the game is so unique and it's so fun, and I don't know what it is, but there's something with me that really enjoys puzzle games where you actually get to control, or there's a character in the actual well of things that are falling down for you to interact with. And this game did it really well. Basically, basically you play as Toad and you can actually manipulate the different blocks that are falling down from the screen, and you have to line them up and make them explode, and then you can move on to the next puzzle room. It's a very simple game, but I love the way they mixed up the gameplay by kind of having it as a platformer and a puzzle game all mixed together, and there's a load of great games like that, including a few more for the SNES, but I'm saving that for a future video where I just talk about Super Famicom ones in particular. But if you do want a really fun puzzle game and you want something a little bit different from the regular Tetris or Dr. Mario, then highly recommend Warios Woods. Now for an RPG, and I included some really good ones in my last video, but this is a really interesting one. This is called Paladins Quest. I think over in Japan its original name was Lenus 2, but the reason that this game is so interesting is not the gameplay in particular, it's a very generic RPG, but as you can see, the reason this stands out so much is the incredible art direction. It's just so different to anything else that I'd ever seen before playing this game. Every area you go to is just like some really weird psychedelic painting, and it just looks so cool. I can kind of overlook the kind of generic gameplay and the kind of almost non-existent story just because of the fascination that I get from visiting all the different places in this game. Is it worth the 50 quid that I paid for it? Probably not, but it is a really interesting game. Yeah, just because of that really unique art style, I definitely recommend you check out Paladins Quest. Now, when you think of cartoon platformers on the SNES, you probably think of something like Aladdin or Lion King, something like that, but there's another one that's equally as good as them, and I actually have my girlfriend to thank for introducing me to this game. This is Looney Tunes Roadrunner. And again, just like Super Celeste, it's incredible to see the SNES running at the speed that it does with this game. It's a very fast-paced game, of course, it would have to be using the Roadrunner license. It also means that it's quite a difficult game as well, because you're literally darting from one side of the screen to the other with almost no time to react, and the controls are very floaty as well. But once you get used to it, it's actually a really fun and well-made game. There's a load of really interesting and unique boss battles as well, and I also love the little cartoons that introduce each level too, where it does a freeze frame and it gives Roadrunner and Coyote different sort of nicknames before the start of each stage, so I just think that's really fun. The graphics, of course, being a Virgin Media game, the graphics and the animation just look fantastic too, so if you like those sort of platformers and you want something a little bit different to what you're probably used to on the system, highly recommend Roadrunner. Although you will get really frustrated later on in the game, and I've not been able to complete it. Okay, now for quite possibly the coolest racing game of all time. This is Rock and Roll Racing. Kind of like Cybernator before it, you can really feel the impact with this game. The frame rate isn't great, it's only 30 frames a second instead of 60 compared to most games on the system, but what is here is a fantastic racing game with loads of combat opportunities as well, which really make this stand out from the crowd. And of course, as the name suggests, the soundtrack is just phenomenal. They really put the SNES's synthesizers to work on this game. The guitars, the drums, everything about it sounds really cool, and I love the covers of all the metal songs that they included in this as well. It actually controls really well too. It's a really well-rounded game, and it has a really cool and strong theme going for it as well. So if you enjoy things like Micro Machines, and you want something a little bit different in the racing genre that's not a Mode 7 racer for once as well, then definitely check out Rock and Roll Racing. Now for a really unique game that I've never seen anything like before. This is Uni Rally, and yes, I've actually kept the sticker on here because I got this from one of my favourite game shops, which is Lee's Games. I would love to go there and make a video at some point, but it is several hours away. So let me know whether you've ever visited that shop before. I would really love to go back at some point this year. But on with the game itself. It's another racing game, but this one is kind of more like a platformer mixed with a racing game, and you basically play as a unicycle, and you're going around these really twisty tracks made of different coloured pipes and things, and there's all sorts of obstacles to avoid, and you're racing against another opponent, and to get ahead of them you actually have to do tricks across the tracks as well. It's a really unique game, like I said. Just take a look at the video. It's really difficult to explain, and the controls do take a little bit of getting used to, but once you do, it's such a fast and rewarding game, and the way the levels just sort of snake around themselves, it's just really fun to play. It may not be the most complicated game out there, but for what it is, It's just really fun to play, and it's really smooth as well. It's another game that really pushes the SNES to its limits in terms of how fast the game is too, so definitely recommend Uni Rally if you want something completely out there. And finally, ending on a high note, this is one of my all-time favourite platforming games. You might have guessed what it was already. This is Sparkster, a sequel to my favourite game on the Mega Drive, which is Rocket Knight Adventures. This one I don't hold in quite as high regard as I do with the Mega Drive original, but I do prefer this one over the Mega Drive sequel, I think. Just about. They are both amazing games. But basically, what this game is and what the Rocket Knight series in general is, you're playing as the main character Sparkster, and you're going around all of these really vibrant levels, but the main gimmick is the fact that you've got a rocket pack which you can charge up and use to send yourself flying through the stage. And a unique feature that's just on this SNES version is the fact that you can press the L and R buttons to dash to the left and right, which gives you a lot more manoeuvrability in the air, and it makes controlling Sparkster quite a bit more enjoyable in this game compared to the other two. The level designs and layouts aren't quite as memorable as either of the other two, but the soundtrack is just as good, and overall it's definitely one of my favourite platformers for the system, so if you've never played it before, definitely check out Sparkster if you want a really fun platformer for the system. And that is it, that is 10 hidden gems for the SNES. Let me know in the comments below what games you consider to be a hidden gem for the system, and of course I'm going to make more of these in the future, so stay tuned if you want to find out even more great SNES games, and click the video over here if you want to find out my top 15 games for the system too. That's it for now, I'll see you all very soon for the next episode. Goodbye.